We're not going to talk about Age of Empires today, but I thought I'd wear a cool hat that is hard to get now. So today we're going to talk about what amounts to honest-to-goodness monsters. First, let me say that Lovecraft always wanted his monsters to be things that actually might be able to exist. In other words, they were science-based, or they were at least, in theory, science. They might have been outside science we actually have. Now, some of his monsters were the result of experiments and research, like Herbert West's reanimator fluid, or from beyond. Others are aliens from the stars or even further away, or from other dimensions. You sometimes get creatures from the distant past. But the point is, all these are potentially real, which Lovecraft thought made them scarier. I agree. So for this episode, I'm going to talk about real monsters. Rather than speculate about what might be out there in the distant void, we're going to start off with what we know to have happened here on Earth. I've said in other videos, I'm really interested in past life and in weird life in general. That's why I wanted to study, arachnids and things like that. So let's look and see how weird our own past life has been. But first, we're going to have a public service message. Please look at the image given here. If you care about paleontology, like I do, go to the website burknowaffairs.com and check it out. They have a pretty well documented record of how the Scottish national heritage has failed in its duty to Scotland to protect this site, as well as how it has actually banned legitimate paleontologists from doing work. The site's Silurian, which makes it especially interesting if you're a Doctor Who fan. So check out burknowaffairs.com, see for yourself. First, I have no patience with idiots that say things like, there weren't real sea monsters, kids. Instead, we had plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, as though giving something a different name changes what it is. Look at a mosasaur. It's obviously a sea monster, and the ancient world had a pretty big variety of them. So we don't need to talk about it more. Now, when I was growing up, the biggest known pterosaur was Pteranodon. It had a body about the same size as a human, maybe a little smaller, and it wasn't really that monstrous. I remember reading again and again in my books, Pteranodon was the biggest any flying thing could be. It could barely handle the airwaves. Then we dug up Asdarchid pterosaurs, and lordy, now we know the pterosaurs got a lot better. Now, in Mark Whitten's book, Pterosaurs, which I recommend, he points out the pterosaurs could fly immediately after hatching. They didn't get parental care. I mean, the parents probably watched the eggs. Once the egg hatched, kids are on their own. The parents flew off. So do the flaplings. He calls them flaplings. This is because they don't grow feathers. They aren't fledglings. This is in marked contrast to birds, where they can't leave the nest till they're almost adult-sized, at least in terms of their bony frame. And once a bird is at its full size, it doesn't get any bigger over time because it can't change its ratio. This means that pterosaurs, because they fly away as kids, they don't carry you back to their nest to feed you to the young. They can't anyway because they don't have grasping feet. Instead, a pterosaur would just eat you on the spot, which is maybe not better for you. Now, there's another feature to this aspect. Now, David Unwin's book, Pterosaurs from Deep Time, says, as pterosaurs grew from a tiny flapling to a huge behemoth, they had to keep growing proportionally to permit constant flight. Birds can't do this. Pterosaurs did. Dr. Cunningham, a Texas paleontologist, says outright that there is no evidence that pterosaurs had to stop growing when they reached a certain size. And in fact, they probably kept growing throughout their life like snakes or crocodiles or lobsters. They could have reached wingspans of 60 meters maybe, but 20 meters or more, 60 feet. Now, David Unwin surmises that some of the giant super pterosaur bones may have been found and are sitting in museum drawers, misidentified as ordinary dinosaurs, if those are ordinary. He writes a plea in his book, custodians, check your archives. Something awful from the skies may be there. Heck, we've even found flying birds bigger than Pteranodon. The Teratorans were enormous carnivorous birds, which may have been related to hawks, we're not sure. They're in the past, and in a lot of art, they're shown as huge condors or vultures. But Mark Whitten points out on his blog, which I recommend, that in fact, Teratorans were almost certainly not scavengers. Their beaks are not designed for tearing meat and swallowing it. I mean, they can do that, but they're designed for holding and controlling live prey. Their hind legs don't grip like an eagle's. Instead, they're made for walking. So they probably hunted like caracaras. They dive to the ground, then walk over to the prey, grab it, and carry it off, or they eat it on the spot. This is the same mode of life that we think that Asdarchids had now, the giant flying pterosaurs. In other words, they weren't fish eaters. Anyway, you're probably not that excited by my talking about well-known ancient life like these, so let's talk about some really weird stuff. Okay, everyone knows that life forms are mostly bilaterally symmetrical. They got a left side and a right side. Heck, that's why Lovecraft made the elder things radially symmetrical, like a starfish to set them apart. But before the dinosaurs, there was a large and successful group of animals which were aggressively asymmetrical. And I don't mean asymmetrical like a blob, like a sponge or whatever. I mean a carefully organized body form that wasn't symmetrical. These are the carpoids. They usually had a tail and a body with a single moving arm that it used to drag itself along, with a mouth on one end and an anus on the other. And we understand them so poorly we don't know which of the two openings is the mouth and which is the anus. Their biology is so weird we literally haven't figured it out. But they were real, and they were advanced enough that for a while some scientists thought that they might be the ancestors to vertebrates and fish, in other words, us. Now, if you look up Cambrian life forms, and you're not already aware of them, you're in for a treat. They're from a long, long time ago, and it's easy to imagine how weird life would be if we've evolved in that direction instead of our own, or something on another planet evolved that direction. There's things beyond the Cambrian. This is the telly monster. It's way after the Cambrian, like 100 million years or more. What is it? We don't really know. They've only been found in Illinois so far. It has a mouth or maybe just a grasping claw on a stalk. It has either eye stalks or balance organs sticking out on either side. It has a tail to swim with. To me, it looks as alien as any of Lovecraft's creations. The fact is, in almost every past time, we can find here and there weird fossils that don't fit into preset ideas. Here's a bizarre eyeball monster from the Jurassic. We don't know much about it, except that obviously is left over from an old 50s alien invasion movie. And this kind of thing is everywhere. But today, we still have some really weird things today to work with. This that we're showing now, I hope, is a slime mold. These are odd in a lot of ways. First, they are literally a giant amoeba up to 5 feet across. So that's pretty cool right there. Second, they live on land, unlike other amoebas. This means they couldn't interact with us. They're not obscure creatures from the jungle tropics. They live like in France and Pennsylvania, where we are. Third, they are colonial animals. Now, they start out as millions of tiny, normal-sized microscopic amoebas. These come together to make the super amoeba. That in itself is bizarre. How can you have a colonial amoeba? We don't know how that works, because nothing as big as this is colonial in the same way. They can either bulk up into huge masses, they can spread into a thin network. They are able somehow to make decisions and choices even though they don't have a brain or a nervous system or any obvious means of communication. Usually we categorize them as fungi or protists, but it's possible that the slime mold lifestyle evolved more than once, which is even more mind-blowing. If that's mind-blowing. So if that's true, there could be something that evolved in another world. Anyway, giant colonial amoebas. Now, we're fortunate so far they've only evolved to eat dead vegetation instead of small children. Then we have the deep sea pyrosomes. Now, we can't really study them because they're so gelatinous they fall apart in our nets. Occasionally one falls into shallow enough water for us to take a look. Also, these aren't primitive jellyfish things. These are advanced chordates. Not fish, but chordates. They can be enormous. A pyrosome sheath can be hundreds of feet long. There's smaller versions too. Also, they glow super brightly. Hence their name. Pyro means fire and some means body, fire body. They aren't hot, they just glow, right? Now, let's take on something that doesn't look weird, but whose behavior is weird. This is the alcon blue butterfly. It lives in Europe, like the Netherlands, England. So you're thinking, okay, a blue butterfly. Now, the alcon blue butterfly caterpillars do not eat plants. They are flesh eaters. The caterpillar emits a secretion that smells and tastes really good if you're an ant. So shortly after the caterpillar hatches, an ant blunders across one and says, wow, this smells good. And when ants find things that smell good, they carry them back to the nest. So once the caterpillar's in the nest, it wiggles through the ant tunnels till it finds the ant nursery, which is full of tasty, tasty larvae and ant eggs, and it eats them. Now, if an ant finds the caterpillar eluding its young, it goes, whoa, this thing tastes good. And it gets basically drunk on the caterpillar's nectar, leaves it alone. The caterpillar just keeps eating the ant larvae. Shut up, dog. Now, when the caterpillar is big enough, it goes into a pupa, and the ants ignore the pupa. It doesn't move. It's not interesting. Now, when the pupa hatches and the butterfly comes out, even the ants can tell something's wrong, and they attack the butterfly. But if you look at the picture of the butterfly, you can see it's covered with fuzz. This fuzz comes off in the ants' mouths, and they can't get a good grip. Plus, they tend to stop attacking and try to clean out the gunk. They go, oh, yuck. Meanwhile, the butterfly races for the surface. Once it finds its way out of the nest, which apparently it doesn't always succeed. Sometimes it blunders into a hole deeper and the ants finally overwhelm it, but usually it finds its way out and then it flies off. Now, you're thinking, why did Sandy tell me about this weird butterfly? Well, consider this life cycle adapted for another social animal. Humans. Imagine a creature which basically makes a devil's deal. That's what the caterpillar is doing. It offers something good for the user. Now, in the ant's case, it's nectar. For humans, it would have to offer something else. A human who found the creature would choose to guard and hide the thing to get its rewards, whatever those are. Man, the dog is having a fit. Humans, we don't keep our kids in a big brood chamber, so presumably the creature would have to entice its keeper to bring it prey. Not necessarily children, but whatever. Sounds a lot like Little Shop of Horrors, doesn't it? Also, if you haven't seen Little Shop of Horrors, either the stage musical or the original movie, go do it. By the way, the film version from the 1980s is the only one that has a sucky happy ending. The original movie, the stage version, they both end properly with the plant triumphant. Hollywood, right? Anyway, in our theoretical human version of the Archon blue butterfly, the creature would eat and eat, being fed by its keepers till it got maturity, which would probably be a big surprise for us. He doesn't even know it has a mature nature. Then the host emerges, it flies away, and spreads more awful man-eating larvae. I doubt this creature would look like a caterpillar or a butterfly. Doesn't have to, but it makes for a great horror movie. What if this was like a Byaku's life cycle or something, Anyway, I could go on. This video is long enough. These are only things from our world. Imagine the things that exist on the outside that Lovecraft talked about. Let your imagination run wild like his did. I wanted to make it clear that even with the limited resources available to Earth life, we have some amazing things. And if you imagine life that is not as Inuit, that doesn't use DNA, like the fungi from Yuggoth, or that doesn't use normal matter, like Cthulhu or the flying polyps, our imagination is probably not enough to understand all the possibilities. That's why we need guys like Howard Phillips Lovecraft to explain what could happen. So, sweet dreams, my dear friends. May we all dream of the horrors from outside. Like me? Look at my notifications and buy my stuff like this. Thanks.